Hello, and welcome to the New York Conversation on Board Diversity, Women Directors During Times of Crisis. Thank you so much for being here with us. I'm Susan Gross-Shalinski, co-chair of the New York Conversation. I'm also the vice chair of the employment law practice at Epstein Becker Green, a national law firm specializing in labor and employment law and healthcare and life sciences, where part of my practice includes advising corporate boards on matters relating to diversity, equity, and inclusion. 2020 has been a memorable year for a lot of reasons, but it's also a year that marks the 10th anniversary of 2020 Women on Boards, the 100th anniversary of a women's right to vote, and the year after we reached 20% of women directors in the Russell 3000 Index. There's certainly been a boost from California's SB 826, requiring public corporations based in California to have at least 3 women directors on their boards by the end of 2021. We have the prime mover behind SB 826 here with us today. You'll meet Betsy in a minute. California recently passed another law requiring public company boards to include at least 1 director from an underrepresented community. Other states have passed or attempted to pass similar but mostly more limited laws, including one in New York State. Our purpose for today's presentation is to increase awareness of the issues of board diversity and result in more corporate boards committing to fill vacant board seats or new board seats with women and diverse candidates. So here's a brief overview of today's program. First, I'll be welcoming Betsy Berkemeier-Creder, CEO of 2020 Women on Boards. She and I will moderate a phenomenal panel of experienced corporate directors. After the panel, we'll have Mally Jarrow and Stephanie Sonnabend, co-founders of 2020 Women on Boards, present the latest 2020 national statistics and where we're going from here. For the second hour, we'll break into our director coach sessions, and you can personally network and learn from a fantastic set of director coaches. Although the breakouts officially end at 3:30, you're invited to remain in your breakout rooms until 4 p.m. to continue the conversation if you wish to do so. Our program is being recorded, so you can watch it again and again, or for those who missed it, they can watch it as well. But the breakout sessions will not be recorded so that we can maintain confidentiality and encourage candid conversation. So now I'd like to say a couple of special thank yous. First, to my co-chairs, Rochelle Rosado and Sandra Zaraga. Our leadership committees I'd also like to thank. You saw them on our opening slides. Thank you so much for all your help with this event. Our director coaches, I'd like to thank them as well. You've also seen them on our opening slides, and you'll see them on our closing slides as well. You'll find them all very impressive, I'm sure. I'd also like to thank Mally Jarrow and Stephanie Sonnabend. Without them, we wouldn't be here. I'd like to thank my assistant, Karen Marmonhalm, as well as my associate, Anna Renier, who along with all the fantastic staff at 2020, worked tirelessly for months in this COVID environment to make the virtual magic happen behind the scenes. And of course, a special thank you to Betsy as well. So now let me introduce one of my co-chairs, Sandra Zaraga, a partner at EY, who will announce and thank today's sponsors. Sandra?
Thank you, Susan. Good afternoon. Good morning, everyone. Those calling from the West Coast. My name is Sandra Zaraga, and I'm one of the co-chairs of our New York Conversation. I'm a principal in EY's Financial Services Office, and I serve our firm's global banking and capital markets clients through their large-scale technology and digital transformation initiatives. Another role that I wear is I'm our diversity and inclusion leader for our financial services consulting practice. I really just wanted to take a moment to thank our sponsors for their generous support of 2020 Women on Boards. It means so much that your businesses support our cause of helping advance more women to corporate boards. So a big thank you to all our amazing sponsors, including our global sponsors, BNY Mellon, RBC, EY, and McKinsey. Our event's platinum sponsors, American Express and Anthem. Our silver sponsor, Variant Advisors, and our bronze sponsors, Epstein Becker Green, MFA, Bunge, American Century Investments, Varagon Capital Partners, Evershed Sutherland, and Equilar. Thank you once again. I now like to turn the floor over to our fearless leader, 2020 CEO, Betsy Berkhammer-Cruder.
Fearless leader, all right. Thank you, Sandra, and thank you, Susan. Well, I'm so delighted to be here today. It's just unbelievable that we are at the finale of all our 28 events that started just a couple of days ago, it seems like. It started November 12th with our first ever global broadcast that 2020 Women on Boards produced. Many of you saw it. In fact, we've had 6,000 registrants for our 28 events, 24 of them in the States and 4 of them internationally in the UK, Zurich, Madrid for all of Spain, and Mexico City. And we're going to continue our global expansion over the years ahead. I thank my colleagues for the introduction. Yes, I'm very proud to be the CEO of 2020 Women on Boards for the last 2.5 years. And 26 years ago, I started with my business partner, a retained executive search firm, Berkhammer Clayton in Los Angeles, which is how I really learned all about how women aren't on boards at that time, but we've helped to propel women on boards through the efforts of 2020 Women on Boards. I also want to thank Women Corporate Directors, an outstanding organization of women who serve on boards, and the CEO, Susan Keating, and the founder, Susan Stotberg, and many of the director coaches you'll meet today are members of Women Corporate Directors, which is the global network of women who do serve on corporate boards. So thank you also for the reference to the legislation, which I'm very proud of. Before I joined 2020 Women on Boards, I was one of the prime movers, the originator of SB 826, which is probably the proudest achievement of my life in the state of California, where that law required at least one woman on every publicly held corporate board in California last year, which resulted in 200 women being named to California companies. And then the next deadline is the end of 2021, when a total of 600 more women will be added, because the requirement is a minimum of 3 women. And many of you New York women and women from all over the country certainly should be contacting California companies, directors and CEOs you may know, and say, hey, I'd like to be one of those 600 board members, women board members, that you're going to consider for the next, by the end of next year, which is really now. So what you're going to learn in your director coaches sessions today should be able to help you hone what you say about yourself, how you position yourself to seek your own corporate boards, whether it's in California or New York or any state in the country. And if you want to travel a bit, you may want to join a Canadian board or a European board, but we have lots to tell you about that. Interesting, I also want to say, in addition to the 6,000 registrants we have for our 28 events and for the global broadcast, we also have 120 panelists throughout the country, throughout the 28 events, and 400 director coaches in total. So we thank everybody for being involved in this very important business issue. And by the way, in our global broadcast, it wasn't just us talking about the importance of the issue of getting more women on corporate boards, but we were joined by, I'd like to say, but the headliners of that great global broadcast were Melinda Gates and Melody Hobson and Valerie Jarrett and Ambassador Milan Verveer, and also Brian Moynihan, the CEO of Bank of America, and Martin South, the president of US and Canada operations for Marsh Insurance. So we want to thank them for being so involved with our global efforts. And lastly, I'd like to, as we're looking at, well, our finale today, I do want to mention what happened just Wednesday morning when NASDAQ announced the historic proposal that they've made to the SEC to require that all of their companies, in fact, all corporate companies, all publicly held corporations, have at least one woman on their board and one minority person, and LGBTQ as well. So it would be 2, at least one woman and a minority population or underrepresented population person on corporate boards, all of whom, of course, would be exceptionally qualified with their business experience and with the value added experience that they would bring to corporate boards. So certainly the face and the perspectives of corporate boards are going to be changing over the years ahead. So I'd also like to thank our co-founders, whom you're going to hear from shortly, Mally Jarrow and Stephanie Sonnabend, who created the idea of 2020 Women on Boards 10 years ago. And the effort, the research, the tracking, the constant collaboration and advocating for women on boards has paid off. No board in the country would have just for the optics alone would ever have any more a total all male, all white board. Because the pressure of shareholders and business in general just won't allow it anymore. So with that, I'm going to call to, all of our panelists today. I'm delighted to introduce them. Excuse me, I'm getting all choked up because this is the end of our 28 events. And I'm just so beside myself with the accomplishment. I want to thank everybody who's been involved. So we have 3 of our 2020 Women on Boards board members, our own board members here on the panel today. And let me introduce Robin Farrakone. Robin, please wave. And Robin is the founder and chief executive officer of Farient Advisors. She has offices both in New York and Los Angeles. And she is an executive compensation, performance, and corporate governance advisory firm. And she's on the board of Trupanion, which you're all gonna love. It's a pet insurance company. And she even has information about that as a perk for compensation packages, which I think will be more and more offered by compensation leaders on corporate boards. And then I'd like to introduce Julie Hill, a longtime friend of mine, who's from Los Angeles, and she is on the board of Anthem and of Lord Abbett Funds here in New York. And you'll enjoy hearing her story and what perspective she brings to corporate boards. Joanna Lau has been on the board of DSW. Many of you wear DSW shoes. She's also on a REIT board and is very involved in nonprofits and her own nonprofit that she will tell you about. And then I don't want him to feel lonely just because he's our one and only man on the panel today, but Herman Bowles is an outstanding corporate leader, and he didn't even have to wave. You might even know who he is just from being our one and only man. But we good men are hard to find, but we're glad to have him with us. And Herman is international vice chair of JLL, which is one of the largest global commercial real estate firms in the world. And he's also on the board of USAA Insurance and Comfort Systems. So I want to welcome our board and welcome back my co-chair and co-moderator, Susan Chilinsky.
Thanks so much, Betsy. So I think we will start off with you, Herman. Question for you today is, today gender diversity and racial diversity are essential business topics for corporate boards. Do you see more companies truly embracing gender and racial diversity as competitive advantage today? And what proactive succession planning efforts are you seeing boards undertake?
Well, Susan, thank you very much. And Betsy, thank you for the introduction. And I am privileged to be here amongst all of these distinguished fellow panelists. And I did notice, I looked down the roster and there are some men that were smart enough to sign up for the session as well. So that's great. So as far as your question is going, yes, I think any company would be deaf and
just one little tech glitch. Let's see. Herman, you froze for a moment, and I'm sure it's not from nerves. So why don't we come back to Herman as soon as his screen unfreezes?
Sounds good. Should we go on to another question, Betsy, or should we have somebody else answer?
Let's come back to Herman on. Why don't I direct a question to Robin? And Robin, and for each of you, would you please at some point during your discussion explain how you got on your first board, et cetera, or in our networking question. But Robin, what experience do boards really value today so that people in our audience can understand what experience they should bring forward or how to position themselves for what boards are really looking for?
Well, thank you, Betsy. It's great to be here. Yeah, so let me just talk a little bit about how I ended up on the Trupanion board. First of all, I'm an animal lover, and in an earlier incarnation, I started a veterinary business as a venture. It was kind of a side project. And so I understood the channel. I understood a key piece of the business. I was simpatico with the mission of helping animals and their owners have better lives. And my skill base helped them. They had been newly public in 2014. And because I know compensation and governance and strategy, that was I think the cream, the icing on the cake, as it were. So I've learned a lot about what boards are looking for, and my own experience has been very helpful there. But certainly the board is its own team. And so the community, the culture of that team, of that board is really important. And I think one of the things board members need are EQ to really understand how to work with that team in a very functional way. Secondly, boards definitely want the relevant skills, whether you can bring audit and finance and accounting skills or comp skills or strategy skills or industry skills, whatever they are. I think boards are really clamoring for that. And I think, it is time consuming. I mean, boards are looking for people who can spend the time and really take the board appointments seriously. And I think that is the third piece. And I think one other thing I'll say is it's a little different for larger companies than smaller companies. Smaller companies they all want oversight, not operations, but the smaller companies want the help. They need more help. The larger companies want more of the oversight and less of the help given their staffing. So.
Makes sense, makes sense. I guess here's one for Julie. Julie, what are the committees that all boards have? Audit, compensation, nominating, governance, and ESG. And what does ESG include? Should women tout their functional experience specifically related to those committees like crisis expertise, diversity, cybersecurity, digital marketing, compensation?
Okay, that's really two questions. So let me start out with ESG. It's environmental, social, and governance. Environmental are issues like climate change, use of water, use of paper, clean energy, so forth. Governance is how one's board is governed, but social is the one that's getting a lot of attention now. It's part of this is because I think 50% of the population is millennials and Gen Xers. Part of it is because of the things that have happened in our country. So the social aspects of how you look at diversity, for example, on your board, how you're looking at income inequality, how you're looking at taking care of your people within your company, all of that I think is important. And in some cases, ESG is a separate committee. It happens on the board where I chair nominations and governance and Anthem, that we have it rolled into nominations and governance. So that's one answer. The other part of your question is, should women tout their particular expertise relative to the job descriptions of audit or compensation or nominations, governance, and ESG? I would say my answer for someone applying for a board is not at the expense of first establishing your general business credentials. I think, as Robin said, it's really important. You are a fiduciary. You need to understand how the company makes money. You need to understand your fiduciary responsibilities. But then, particularly, it used to be that people were recruiting heavily for financial experts for audit. But as ESG becomes more important, as the social issues continue to be more important, it doesn't hurt to work into that interview particular areas of expertise.
Makes sense.
Great, I think that's my cue. We don't have Herman back yet, do we?
Not yet.
Not yet. Well, I hope we didn't scare him away. Herman, come on back. So Joanna, let me ask you, there is no way to apply for board positions. And please, everybody jump in too when after Joanna gets a chance to answer. This is more a conversation than just one-on-one. But so corporate positions are not posted, they're not announced publicly, and that's as it should be. Board positions are handled close to the vest by boards looking for relationships of trust. And but how do people find out about board positions? And oh, there he is. He's back. We'll come back to you in a second, Herman. And you know, other than traditional networking opportunities, what non-traditional ways do you recommend that women find corporate boards?
There's a poll of questions because time has really changed. I remember my first board seat. I really did not went out to look for a board seat. I was invited to a private dinner. It's a fundraising. And one of the important person didn't show up, so they need a fill in. So I got invited to this dinner, and I get to sit with Senator Ted Kennedy and his wife and a couple of other executives. It was really a big dinner of 8 people. So I was invited. I end up sitting next to this chairman of a company, and he was talking to me about a company he's about to spin off and taking it public. And he asked me if I'd be interested in exploring maybe joining the board. And I was like, yeah, sure. I don't even know what a board's supposed to do. So
That happens.
yeah, so I certainly know what it's like to join a board and not knowing what you're supposed to do, because 30 years ago, they don't have a book. They don't have all the activities and education we have today of how to be a board member. So you kind of learn on the job. But that was then. Time has really changed. Today, I think because of so much corporate governance in place and best practice and NACD and ISS, there's a lot of watchdogs. So boards become very cautious of how they recruit board members. So they go through a more stringent process. That may not be positive either, because certainly the other way of how to get on board, in my opinion, is, you know, everybody said you need to network, you need to find out people on certain boards that you're interested in. The problem of networking, it's not about who you know, it's who knows you. Because people really need to know you, that you are interested and you have the capacity. And you cannot ask people to do the work for you. You really have to help them know who you are, what skills you're going to bring, and you have to be very specific. It's a lot of work. It's not like just putting your name on LinkedIn or a search firm. You really have to think of it as a full-time job search. It is a job in a way. So I do say that it's an art. You really have to want to do it. So you have to think about the industry. I heard someone said earlier about, I think it's Robin, you know, people look for relevant experiences for good reason for small business, because they're looking for you to come and help propel it to the next level. But for bigger company like DSW, they are interested in a new sets of eyes. They don't need another merchants. They don't need buyers, but they really need. So I went in as a technologies person, bringing in e-commerce and cybersecurity experience. And frankly, I don't know much about merchants, so I could ask the stupid questions. It's all right, because, you know, people don't know. So sometimes if it's a good company, if it's a good CEO, it's a good board, they welcome that. What did we, you know, sometimes we said they drink their own bath water. So I don't give them fresh water. Right.
Can I add to that, if I might? Joanna, that was great, and I agree with what you're saying. You were very fortunate, by the way, to sit next to the right person at that one dinner. But for most of us, that doesn't necessarily occur. But I would say not only reaching out, and it's important not to sell too hard, because it's not like you're selling, you're really trying to find the right fit. I think that's more of an important concept here. And then listening, keeping your eyes and your ears open. There's all kinds of lists about what boards are turning over, and when somebody might be aging off a board and those kind of things. But really keeping your eyes and ears open and listening for the cues, I think is really an important consideration these days. And fit is the critical thing.
Well, double back on that, Robin, because every moment you're with somebody, you're interviewing, right?
Yes.
One might say that was lucky to sit next to this individual, but maybe because, I captured the opportunity and I
Yep.
said the thing that he wanted to hear at the time. So I think we have to be mindful that in every single situation, for those of us who are interested in joining board, for every single situation you're in, consider it as an interview. And
Yes.
Yeah.
That's true. That's true. Well, since Herman is back, Susan, would you rephrase the question for Herman and we'll continue?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Yeah, I was asking you, Herman, about diversity efforts you're seeing that boards are undertaking, or are they?
Yes, well, I apologize. The power went off, the generator came on, and of course we lost the power. So I'm now at my wife's desk, so a little different background. So as I was saying earlier, there is no doubt that boards are very, very conscious of diversity now. And the issue is of asking, why are they so conscious now? And one of the things I've done in the 20 years that I've been on boards, been on several boards, is it really comes down to leadership. And that leadership comes down to vision. And a good board member, you will note, has the ability to see around corners. And one of the things that we're noticing now, and think about it, in terms of women, right, you've always been about 50% of the population. If we think of people of color between 2035 and 2040, that's going to be the majority of people in America. So think about it, if you're in that boardroom and you either have a B2C, business to consumer, or B2B business, and in terms of thinking about the following, where are you going to get the people to do the job in the labor war? And then where are you going to sell your products? And without that vision in the boardroom, you're going to miss, because remember, the difference between good and great is not a lot. And that insight makes the big difference. So we're going to talk later about, why that is important, both from a consumer's perspective, and it's also important for your employees to make sure, all of you think about it. First thing you do when you look at an organization, somebody comes to a meeting, they're selling you something. I know as an African-American, I'm looking around saying, well, where are the other African-Americans? And one quick story I had on one of my boards I'm on, I can remember this was about 7 years ago. It was an all-male board. I was the only African-American on the board. We had an opening coming up. And I'm a big proponent of diversity. And I said, hey, look, we need to proactively make sure we have a woman. And one middle-aged white male said, we can't do that. That's a quota. We can't do that. And after a little bit of an animated conversation, the rest of the board agreed that we need to specifically tell the recruiter, we are looking for a female for this role. We did it, and that individual is now chair of the audit committee.
Excellent. Excellent.
Fantastic. Any other thoughts on diversity before I move on to networking?
I think
All right.
diversity on board right now, it's really being on the spotlight. So I think there's a lot of opportunities out there. I mean, thinking about all the investment firms and insist that all boards should, have not only diverse skill, but diverse background.
Betsy, can I
have a,
I'm sorry.
I had a quick question, Susan. You had asked whether you thought diversity became a competitive advantage. And I think maybe it does now, maybe it once did. I actually think if you don't have it, it's going to be a big competitive disadvantage. So that we're almost at a tipping point where you got to do what Herman's talking about, which is think about it very seriously. But if you don't, I think the risks are pretty significant.
And I might just add a perspective to the networking conversation. I'm a big proponent of networking, but I would ask most of you to think about connecting. networking by its name is somewhat transactional. It's not bad. You know, you do this, I'm doing this because I'm going to get something back. Connecting, on the other hand, is something I've done my entire life. And I think we, those of us, minority women in these underrepresented places, if we come off too aggressive, right, we get the unconscious bias of you're an aggressive woman or you're a uppity black male or whatever. So I concentrate on something I call connecting. And connecting, as Joanna had this great experience, connecting is when you do something for someone without any expectation of getting anything in return. And you've got to do that on a consistent basis. So you meet somebody at a event, and you know that their son plays soccer, and you see an article. Take that article. Now it's electronic, but I do a lot of note writing. That's important because the electronic thing goes away. The little card you send with a handwritten note, it stays there. It's branding that you have all the time. So send that note and don't say anything about what your objective is. You're building your network by connecting with people, and it'll be such more substantive going forward. And that's what people think of you, because you heard how people get on boards, okay? It's a result of that network, which is a result of your connections.
Betsy, can I go back just for a second to
Julie.
this issue on whether diversity matters or not? There are a lot of studies that have been done. I don't think we've mentioned that now. Connecting diversity to the bottom line. I think there's also studies that have been done on understanding that diversity is a key enabler of innovation. But I came across a study that was done, I think, by the Harvard Business Review a couple of years ago, that basically said that 69% more income is relevant to companies that have a bigger percentage of diversity. And also something like 91% of people who work for the companies feel better about working there. So I think we have to remember that there's a business case as well as it being the right thing to do.
That research was Credit Suisse. Also, McKinsey has done that research.
Conference Board of Canada. I mean, it's been repeated over and over and over again. So I think people are generally accepting the net business case for it now.
I'd also like to add to that, Julie, is an important point to bring up. And now I think the stakes are even going up because there's a lot of capital out there that's conscious capital. And if you can't access part of the capital markets, you're going to be disadvantaged again. So diversity is, I think, has been shown to be better for decision making, but it's also better for access to capital, access to talent, all kinds of things that all together create competitive advantage.
You know, I can tell you from my mutual fund board experience that fiduciaries, investors are recognizing that ESG, which includes diversity, is part of their fiduciary responsibility. So I think the landscape has really changed.
Yep. Yes.
And just to mention that ESG, once again, is one of the major committees. There's finance audit, there's compensation and ESG now, which has taken on such a huge role that really wasn't as significant before. So that allows avenues for women with cybersecurity experience and environmental engineering experience to be, social media experience to be sought for corporate boards, and opens up new career paths rather than just a CEO or CFO to be on boards. So to Herman's point, let's not call networking anymore. Let's call it connecting. And Susan, would you like to
let's talk a little bit more about the experience, right? Because a lot of people know that maybe a nonprofit board is a way to, earn trusted relationships and visibility. But two avenues that women rarely think about are industry trade associations and appointed commissions, whether it's city, state, or federal. What are some other ways to become visible that perhaps women don't know about?
So I'll grab that one. The one thing that I want to emphasize is you have to be good in your own career. You have to have laid a groundwork, and you have to be known for being good. So you can do that, I think, through trade associations. You can take leadership positions. You can do not-for-profit boards. But I think it's really important that people understand that working on your own career and excelling in that is part of the road to being on a board. Because nobody's going to, with all due respect to Betsy, I don't think anybody's going to come after you for a board if you're good on particular issues in ESG unless you have that background going in as well. Just very quickly, I was a sitting CEO. This goes way back, longer than I should probably mention, but I think almost 30 years. And going to the question about not networking, connecting, one of the situations that I was in is because I was a female in a very non-traditional industry. I worked for a British company around the US home building, land development operations. So I was somewhat visible. The good news and the bad news is if you're bad, you're really visibly bad. If you get the job done, then people, start to think you're competent and can help you. And I got a phone call. I hadn't even thought about doing boards. I was still just trying to figure out how to be a baby CEO. And I got a phone call from a woman who was in an organization that I was in, which actually happens to be one that Betsy and I belong to, the trusteeship, which is part of the International Women's Forum, and I think Robin too. And she asked if I wanted to go on a healthcare board. And my response was, I'm in home building. What do I have to do with a healthcare board? And she convinced me that I could learn that. One of the lessons I say to young women or people who are trying to get on boards who haven't been on one, because there's a catch-22, right? You have to have been on a board to get on a board, is just if you believe you have the fundamental capacity, say yes at the door. So I went and interviewed. I had a 4-hour interview with the CEO. Actually, it was kind of a 4-hour argument, as I recall. Very forceful, dynamic CEO. And when I left, I thought, the guy will never call me back again. But he did. And I learned his style was you had to push back at him or, he would walk over you. So I think knowing who you are, being good at what you do, being prominent in one way or another, and then talking to people. Like Joanna said, if you sit down at the table, talk to whoever's next to you, use your opportunities.
Mm-hmm.
I'll address also from a networking or Herman's point connection perspective. It is very important. It's not just your skill, it's also your personality. A lot of time board are looking for rapport, chemistry. I mean, is that person is going to not only bring value, but is this person going to bring energy to the board? Now, at time, I think board really need a refreshed boost to have energy coming in, because new discussions, anytime you bring a new board member, it's a new board, you bring a new discussion, you bring a new energy. So I think it is important that you have to prepare yourself to be yourself, who you are. I mean, my second board was kind of interesting. I mean, it's funny. The first board, I was sitting next to the gentleman who's going to spin off a company. The second board I was on a golf course.
That's what ESG stands for. Environment, social, and golf, right?
Got it. So I happen to be on a golf
I'm kidding.
tournament.
I'm kidding. Sorry.
No, it may be. If I was on a golf tournament, and it was a banker, and he was just playing golf. But oh, thank goodness, I didn't give myself any gimme. So I counted every strokes. So it is very important. You never know where you're going to run into people that may be looking for a board member. So the other thing about what Herman said about writing a note, I think it's so spot on, because today we're bombarded with email, thank you. And writing a note is great, but I will also follow up with an email, because people do throw away notes, but having a follow-up email, sometimes it's a reminder.
Right away.
Yeah, it's a reminder. Hey, I'm still really thankful. So, it's everybody have different styles.
Well, it's really good point. And I just wanted to ask. Oh, yes, go ahead.
Yeah, let me just add one point that I think it's important, particularly for those of us in underrepresented groups. It is certainly true. We talk about the board matrix that we'll talk about if we haven't, where the board is looking for all of those skills and that they need. However, never forget that the fundamental role of a board member is to oversee the entire corporation. Having said that, you must present yourself as a total manager, not just some expertise in some very fine area. Because let me tell you, if the board needs expertise, the way you do, you bring a consultant in to tell them if it's that specific at that point. but what you need to represent yourself as a problem solver, an individual who knows how to take information, organize it, analyze it, and be able to come up with a solution. And remember, a good board member sees around corners, and you use all of your world life experiences, and very seldom are you going to have a decision that's right in the bullseye of what your expertise is. That's why you have to have that general knowledge and able to look at a situation. And then the other situation that's very important is you may have the right answer, but it's also important how you communicate that answer. Because remember, you're already in a minority in that room, and people may have unconscious bias, et cetera, et cetera. And one of the things that I've done with that, and my wife actually taught me this, I try to never say the word but. Robin says something, and I said, Robin, that's a great point, but. As soon as I say but, Robin glazes over right away. In that nanosecond, she's wondering, what is he going to disagree with me on? So instead, I would say, Robin, that's a good point, and I'd like to add. And in that way, she is at least going to listen to me. So let's think about all of our communication techniques. Let's think about both the verbal and the nonverbal communication that we do, because those are the skills that not only going to help you get on the board. Once you get there, you don't want to just have a seat. You want to be a productive contributor to the organization.
Excellent point. Excellent point. Susan.
Yeah, I guess one question that we kind of like to ask is, what is the number one thing that you've witnessed that you recommend that women don't do in the pursuit of their corporate boards? What would you advise women never to say? We'll ask Robin here.
Well, this one, I'm sure we can all come up with different things, all of which would be right. And the thing that I would say is the number one thing is not only my advice for women, but for men as well, which is don't tell the CEO what to do. You know, I feel like the CEOs are, you know, they're usually extremely capable. They're usually strong-willed, and you're there to oversee, to ask great questions, to listen. It's not like you're not going to uncover issues when there are issues, but you're not trying to tell people what to do. You're trying to listen, ask great questions, and then provide suggestions and provide, you know, greater inquiry if it's needed. But I wouldn't tell the CEO what to do, and start with that.
Robin, I'd agree with you, and I hope the CEO of Anthem is listening while I'm saying that. The collegiality that Herman is talking about, I think, is really important, but there's a fine line between collegiality and kind of groupthink. And so all the skills that you can have that say all the positive things that you can, but then to carefully bring in suggestions. And having been a CEO, I didn't have a board because my division wasn't public, but I wouldn't want my board members to tell me what to do. So I have empathy for that. But I also think that as we're navigating all of these social changes and all the things that are pressing on us now, the racial inequity, I'm thinking about moms at home, for example, who we haven't even thought about this, about how they've had to school their kids. They don't have daycare, they don't have schools and all of that. So as we navigate all of these issues, these are new things for companies to think about. And I think you'll find a variety of openness to what is appropriate to be discussed. And I think a lot of times women, I'm going to use my implicit bias here. And I'm going to say that I think women sometimes ask questions that aren't asked by others, and because of the different walk of life. And I think this is true about diversity. What we bring is our worldview, our experience. But I think it's really important as we go forward to understand that while we're not telling the CEO what to do, we also have a leadership role in setting the tone in the company, the openness in the company to issues, and our capacity to bring our lived experience, particularly now when we're going to come out of this health crisis with maybe mental health crisis, financial crisis. There's still a lot of things that we have to deal with. So that level of candor and trust and openness, I think, is going to be especially important.
Really good point about crisis, Julie. And before we leave our panel, I'd like to ask everybody, our theme is women directors during times of crisis. We are in the worst crises we've ever seen. right now with the pandemic, the racial injustice, the economic hits that all companies are taking, furloughed employees, unemployment higher than ever. How have you seen women bring perspective to the boards where you serve, or in other situations where crisis experience becomes an asset to women and men who come to the board, but in particular, women who are in our audience? How can they use their experience getting their companies through this horrible time as future ammunition, if you will, for them to get on boards?
Can I start with that?
Yeah.
With a male perspective. So first of all, I think, certainly not everybody in the audience is a mother and running a home, but those that are, just looking at my wife, I mean, if you took your resume and write down all the things that you do, okay, now think of it right now. Many of you work, you have kids that are being homeschooled, you have relatives that need to be taken care of. You're taking care of the household and you're cooking, et cetera, et cetera. So those skill sets that give you the opportunity to do that and keep your cool, that is exactly what's needed in the boardroom. So that's transferable. And I think the thing that Julie talked about earlier about in terms of how do you get people to make a decision? My wife and many women I know have a very astute skill to have me do something without directly telling me. Because when you directly tell someone to do something, it's very much what Julie said. It's almost like the but. And I've just seen this, and I don't want to characterize too broad, but that's a skill that I think is innate in a lot of women. So use that skill to your advantage. It's not about telling people what to do. This gets back to Robin and the board. You're not telling anybody what to do. You're asking great questions. So that's important. So thinking about that. I think women also, I've obviously served on boards before there were women on the board. There is a sense of seriousness that comes, because I'm going to tell you, when it's an all male environment, there's locker room behavior. It's not as bad as it used to be, but it still exists. I'll tell you, no matter what. You put a woman in the environment, and that gets, cleaned up. I don't want you thinking it's total debauchery, but it's just the seriousness that a woman can bring to that discussion, I think, is phenomenal. And then the next issue is just decision making. And again, to be a board member, again, you don't have to be an expert. You can be on a utility board and not be a scientist, not be an energy expert, but you know about people, you know about marketing, you know about equality, and you pick those moments. To be on a board, you do not have to hit a grand slam every time a discussion takes part.
Really good point.
Think about it. You can go into the Hall of Fame in baseball hitting 225. Okay. And I often say I've had maybe 2, maybe 3 grand slams. There's a hit, there's a single, there's a double, triple, and a grand slam. I've had 2, maybe 3 in 20 plus years of board service. So it doesn't happen. That's dependent on a whole bunch of 3 other people have to be on base and you have to be up to bat, right? But don't feel like you've got to swing for the fences every time.
Well,
at the same time, don't be a knot on the log and not say anything. Okay, so there's a nice blend of where you want to be. And remember, you can be a Hall of Famer hitting 225.
Well, that's such a good point. And Julie, sorry. Yes, I just wanted to ask all of you to chime in on what's happening with the crisis in your companies. And if you see this as a particular time of important involvement with the women on your board. So was that Joanna or Julie who raised a hand?
Julie, you want to go first?
Sure. First of all, well, Betsy, I've been remiss. I want to say congratulations to you before this ends, just to get through almost 30 of these panels and the give back that you've given to women. It's phenomenal. So thank you.
It's not just me, but thank you, Julie.
The whole
vast team.
I think what we have to remember is everybody's in crisis. Everybody has been on too many Zoom calls, and we're the lucky ones. We're not the ones who are losing our jobs. We're not the ones who've got particularly the young children issues at home. So I think just the fact that all of our companies have pivoted the way that they have is huge to begin with. to not have the workforce together, to try to keep their own lives together as they're trying to lead. So that issue is true for everyone, male, female, diverse, not diverse. My sense of this is that there is a caretaking aspect that happens that maybe sometimes comes more readily to women, not necessarily. But I think there is this kind of a magic number on boards, 3 or more women. The conversation becomes somewhat different. And certainly what we're having to do now is care for our people, care for our customers. In the example of Anthem, this is a terrifically fraught time in our history to be in healthcare. So there are many of the skills that are innate to women. We have a woman CEO, we have a woman chairman, women chair boards. So I do think that there are some skills there that we can fall back on.
So
If I could just add, oh, I'll go after Joanna. Go ahead, Joanna.
So I want to say that, summarize that it's empathy. I think what Herman said is women have a lot of experience, so we know where everything is coming from. So empathy is really important. But think about it: the company you're on the board, it's fight or flight. So it's really, I mean, you talk about, I'm in a consumer world. Stores are closed. Okay, so layoff, furlough, it's difficult. It's very, very, very difficult. One of the things being a board member during this difficult time, it's really trying to listen hard.
Mhm.
And sometimes we're so eager to help that we forgot about the nose in, finger out.
Yeah,
Because we want to
exactly.
go fix the problem, but you can't do that. You really, because we started asking a lot of questions, and it's not helpful. It has to be methodic. We have to compartmentalize the issues. The company, there's the employees, there's the
Right.
consumers.
So
It
true.
is very critical that we really have to listen. It is not, like Julie said, it's not just women. Men have a difficult time talking about. I was on a Zoom call with some engineers, and I'm looking at everybody's background. We are very fortunate. We have a wonderful office that we could run to.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people
Who
that work
can't?
out of their garage, their
Right.
basement. I mean,
Right.
you can see it.
Well, excuse me one second, Joanna. We're sort of wrapping up. I want to get to Robin on that crisis question, and thank you for those comments, Robin.
Yeah, so I'll just weave it in. The listening is important because at Trupanion, one thing that we've learned lots of things through the crisis, and the business model has been pretty durable through this, which is great. People still want to make sure they have insurance for their cats and dogs. But what was interesting is at the beginning of the pandemic, everybody had to be at home. People are used to bringing their cats and dogs to work every day. They have a daycare center, and all of that went away. When it came time to think about how do we bring people back, what was really interesting is the people with children who had been using the daycare center really wanted to come back. They wanted to come back to the office. And so it informed how we brought people back. And having people at the company and on the board listen to that and then figure out a kind of a back to the office plan that took that into account was one example of how the diverse listening skills can, I think, inform really good decisions.
Well, and boards are very much involved in what's happening with their companies right now, right? Are you finding in general, all of you were in more meetings and more Zooms with your boards than in normal times?
Oh, yes.
I'm sure you are. Well, I'm sorry that time is getting away from us because it would be so great to keep on talking. But we're going to have the opportunity to talk further with you in the director coach sessions. And Susan, shall I go ahead and introduce our co-founders at the moment?
Please do.
So I'd like to say thank you to our panel members. Thank you so much. And it's such a great dynamic group. And we're going to bring you together again, I can tell, by popular demand. But I'd like to say, as the CEO of 2020 Women on Boards, to give my personal recognition to Mally Giro and Stephanie Sonnabend, who are the women behind this entire campaign. And we are a campaign. We are not a membership organization. we are focused on campaigning to get this issue globally marching forward. And Stephanie and Mally have done such a terrific job. I'm glad they brought me on. And I've never had so little sleep in my entire life, but at least someday I'll know that we all did something very, very special. And now is our time. And it was the vision of Stephanie and Mally 10 years ago that launched us into this campaign. So I'd like to introduce both of them to take a bow. And I wish we could have, our clapping is silent, but would you all just join with me in saying thank you to Stephanie and Mally for doing what they've done and leading the way. So we're clapping thunderously. So I will turn it over to you first, Stephanie.
Okay, thank you, Betsy. What an insightful panel. So as you heard, I'm Stephanie Sonneborn, the co-founder and chair of 2020 Women on Boards. And we're really excited to be closing out the week with you here today in New York, as we did last year. We really appreciate everyone's involvement in the event today, but I also want to give a big thank you to Betsy, our CEO, who attended and was a major participant in just about all the events, some of them at 5 a.m. California time. I also want to give a big thank you to Heather Spilsbury, our 2020 Women on Board CMO, who did a fabulous job with orchestrating the global and the city-state events. And to our other members of the 2020 Women on Boards team, especially Brianna Baki, who's been an essential part of the 2020 team for over 7 years. We started the campaign in 2010 because we were dismayed by the women were making little progress getting onto corporate boards. The percentage of women on US company boards was stagnant and hadn't changed in over a decade. So I asked my good friend Mally Giro if she wanted to join me in starting a nonprofit campaign to create a goal to get to 20% women on boards by the year 2020, hold companies accountable, and increase the visibility of the issue. Fortunately, she said yes.
Well, of course I said yes. That's what friends do. Thank you, Stephanie. I'm Mally Giro, co-founder and vice chair of 2020 Women on Board, zooming in from Boston, Massachusetts. So we had a great idea, but we worried, if we build it, will they come? Well, they came by the thousands, not just here in the US, but from across the globe. And it was your participation and your voices that helped us build a national conversation that encouraged companies to diversify their leadership ranks to include women. I may live in Boston, but I was born and raised in New York City, so I'm very happy to be with you today. And thank you for joining us. And I'm going to turn this back to Stephanie.
Okay. Year over year, we report on the number of women on corporate boards on the Russell 3000, the largest publicly traded companies in the US, which we feature in our Gender Diversity Index and database published annually on our website. When we started the campaign in 2010, the percentage of women on the Russell 3000 had been stagnant at around 10%. Since then, the numbers of women has steadily increased. In the past 4 years, going from 16.0% nationally to 22.6% women on boards of the Russell 3000. Over the same period, the percentage of women directors on the Russell 3000 companies headquarters in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut have climbed from 15.6% to 22.6% over the same 4 years. And you can see on the slide all the different states that we feel we're representing here today. You'll notice that Connecticut is a little funny there, and that really has to do with the fact that there have been some companies that were on the Russell 3000 and are no longer based in Connecticut. So that's why the numbers are a little, have gone a little, not a straight directory up there, but a little sideways. But among the 25 states in the US that have more than 20 companies on the Russell 3000, all but 2, Florida and Utah, exceed the 20% goal for women on their boards this year. The states that achieved more than 20% for the first time are Arizona, Colorado, Indiana, Pennsylvania, Texas, and Tennessee. Connecticut was one of 4 states exceeding 20% women on boards in 2018, and New York and New Jersey exceeded 20% women on boards last year in 2019. Of the 428 companies headquartered in the tri-state area, 58% of them are at 20% or greater. There are 863 women directors on the boards of companies headquartered in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut. 540 of them are in New York headquartered companies. So imagine that all companies in New York, New Jersey, and Connecticut were at 20% or greater. All that is needed is between 230 and 263 women, depending on whether they add a seat or retire a man. It's actually not that big a hurdle to overcome. And perhaps some of you here in attendance today will fill some of those seats. This year, we celebrate our success and the completion of the first phase of the campaign. Yet, we all know that 20% goal is no longer good enough. As Melody Hobson said at the Global Conversation on November 12th, we are pleased, but not satisfied. And now, Melody, why don't you talk about what's next for the campaign?
Thanks. Well, if 20% is no longer good enough, what is? Beginning in 2021, our campaign will advocate for parity on boards, what we are now calling gender balance. It's a bold goal, but we are ready for the challenge. So where are we now? Nationally, 163 out of 2,982 Russell 3000 companies are gender balanced, just about 5%. In New York, there are 16, New Jersey, 17, and Connecticut, 2 companies that are gender balanced. So we have our work cut out for us. Our vision remains this, our new vision will be that all public company boards will be gender balanced, with women holding half of corporate boards. Let that be the model for all boards, public company boards, private companies, nonprofits, and trade and government advisory boards and commissions. To support this new vision, as of January, we will change our name to 50/50 Women on Boards. And this is where we all take a round of applause. Yay. We may have a new name, but we hold to the same core values: to educate, collaborate, and advocate for more women and diversity on boards. Our highly popular virtual Get On Board workshops will resume in February 2021, helping board-ready women position themselves and network to get on a board. If you think you might want to attend, don't wait to register because they fill up fast. We are also pleased to announce a brand new program coming in early 2021, Path to the Boardroom. This program is for women in their mid-careers who are interested in exploring becoming board ready within the next 5 to 10 years. You can find out more about that on our website. You can also find out more about us, our research, our campaign programs on the 2020wob.com, probably soon to become 5050wob.com. You can join us on the conversation on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. Thanks so much for having us. And now I'm going to turn this back to Rochelle.
Thank you for that, Stephanie and Mally. What an act to follow, and how exciting. My name is Rochelle Rosato, and this is actually the 3rd year as co-chair for the New York chapter. I'm the leader of talent, learning, and inclusion at Marsh & McLennan for both the US and Canada regions. And it has been an honor and a privilege to dedicate a significant runway of my career to advancing and accelerating women in leadership positions by actively coaching, sponsoring, and mentoring identified areas for growth and development. One of the most meaningful roles that I actively play is to lead diversity, inclusion, and equity efforts that truly work towards strengthening a culture where colleagues feel they belong. All of our panelists spoke to this in some way, shape, or form, especially now as we go through these uncharted times. It's been thrilling to have had such an active and relevant role within 2020 Women on Boards, the campaign, and really to be a part of the paradigm shift where the focus on gender, race, and ethnicity in the boardroom is front and center, and we are driving forward our efforts with deliberate rigor. If that wasn't a takeaway from today, I don't know what is. So now I will explain how the breakout rooms will work, and we can go ahead and get started as soon as we give you the go ahead. In the invitation that you received for the program, there were 2 Zoom links. So now you will locate the second link, which is intended for your breakout room. And then you'll get out of this Zoom. You'll click on the other link, which is specific to you and the others in your breakout. And you'll have roughly 2 minutes we'll give for you to get out of this Zoom and into your breakout. And recognize that we had said that even though we'll close at 3:30, you're welcome to stay on until 4 p.m. Eastern if it suits you and the group. And also because of the nature of the breakout rooms, we won't be regrouping. So please, I'd like to throw this back to Betsy just to say a quick goodbye and her closing remarks. Thank you.
Thank you, Rochelle, and welcome back, Susan. My closing remarks are just to say, wonderful job to our co-chairs, Susan Gross-Shalinski and Rochelle Rosado and Sandra Zaraga. You've been terrific to work with and volunteer with, and this has been the result of months and months of preparation. And we're going to start again. We'll just start rolling again in January. But all 3 of you have been just terrific. So my great gratitude. And also wanted to say, in addition to our Chief Marketing Officer, Heather Spilsbury, and our Senior Director of Finance, whom Stephanie thanked, I'd like to add Melanie Endert, our Head of Registration for all of our 28 events throughout the globe, and LB Bayer, our Corporate Relations Chief Cook, and cooking great packages together. And also our production team, Kat Cody and Kent Speakman and their team for all they've done there from Connect. So just those thank yous before I turn it over to Susan and then our breakout. Susan.
Excellent. Yeah, just wanted to say thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you next year. And thank you so much to Betsy and the team.
So go ahead and close out. This is our finale, our final event for the year, and we'll see you in January. Starting again, everybody. Close out, leave this meeting and go to your next. Have a great afternoon. And great happy holidays to everybody.
Soul on fire, it helps me unwind, yeah. The right kind of woman to help me feel fine. My life to have this love come and bury my strife and carry on, and carry on. She got the soul of a warrior, but a tender heart, yeah. Had me hooked on her love right from the pleasure and happiness is never far, no. 'Cause I've been waiting for most of my life to have this love come and bury my strife and carry on. And carry on. Here she comes like the rays of the sun, she shines. 10 out of 10, Lord, she's no less than a dime. Sets my soul on and bury my strife and carry on and carry on, yeah. Oh, oh, Here she comes like the rays of the sun, she shines. A 10 out of 10, Lord, she's no less than a dime. Sets my soul on fire and helps me unwind.